There's a person in your life, maybe you know them well, maybe you just know of them, who doesn't seem to be doing anything particularly impressive. They drive a normal car. They live in a normal neighborhood. They don't wear anything that signals wealth. They don't talk about money much. They don't post about their portfolio. They don't have a side hustle with a personal brand. And yet somehow, years from now, you're going to find out that this person has been quietly, systematically building a net worth that is going to genuinely stun you, not because they got lucky, not because they got a windfall, but because they were doing something you couldn't see for years in plain sight. The reason you couldn't see it isn't that they were hiding anything. It's that real wealth building is almost entirely invisible. It makes no noise. It doesn't show up at parties. It doesn't drive past you on the freeway. It accumulates in accounts no one looks at, through behaviors no one notices, over time horizons no one thinks to observe. And the reason most people don't build it isn't that they don't want to. It's that everything about the modern financial environment is oriented toward the opposite, toward spending that shows, toward displays that signal, toward the version of financial life that's visible, even when the invisible version is the one that actually works. Today, I'm going to give you 10 specific ways to build wealth without anyone knowing. Not secret schemes, not unusual strategies. The behaviors that the quietly wealthy actually use, and the reason they're invisible is the same reason they're powerful. My name is Max, and I want to help you learn how to make your money work more for you in your life. This channel is about the real mechanics of wealth, stripped of performance and pretense. Just the actual behaviors that produce the actual outcomes. Subscribe if you want more of that. This is what we do. Okay. The belief we need to clear out first. Most people unconsciously associate wealth building with visible effort, with hustle that can be observed, with strategies that have names you can explain at a dinner, with sacrifices big enough to be worth mentioning. The implicit belief is that serious wealth building looks serious, that it requires dramatic action, obvious discipline, visible constraint. And this belief shapes behavior in ways that are quietly destructive. Because if you believe serious wealth building should look serious, you'll keep waiting to start until you can do it seriously. You'll over-engineer your approach because simple doesn't feel serious. You'll look for strategies impressive enough to justify the effort, rather than boring enough to actually run forever. The overlooked truth, the one that separates the quietly wealthy from everyone else, is that the most powerful wealth building behaviors are specifically the ones nobody can see. Not because secrecy is the strategy, but because visibility and real wealth accumulation are structurally in opposition. What's visible costs money. What's invisible compounds it. The less your financial life performs for an audience, the more efficiently it runs for you. Here's the analogy. Think about how coral reefs are built. Coral doesn't announce itself. There are no milestones, no visible progress markers, no moment where someone stands back and says, "Look at how much we've done." Individual polyps, each tiny and essentially invisible, deposit calcium carbonate at a rate of about a centimeter per year, for decades, for centuries. And eventually you have a structure so massive it can be seen from space. The reef isn't built by impressive individual acts. It's built by the invisible, continuous compounding accumulation of small, consistent deposits that no individual observer would ever notice in the moment. That is exactly how quiet wealth gets built. 10 behaviors, each unremarkable in isolation, each producing its own small, consistent deposit, compounding together over years into something genuinely enormous. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the invisibility of real wealth building isn't just a nice metaphor. It has a specific psychological mechanism that makes it work better than the visible alternative. There's a concept in social psychology called social facilitation, the well-documented tendency for people to perform differently when observed versus unobserved. Interestingly, the effect cuts both ways. Being observed improves performance on simple, well-practiced tasks, but impairs performance on complex or judgment-heavy ones. Financial decision-making, especially long-term wealth building, is precisely the kind of complex, judgment-heavy activity that is impaired by an observing audience. When your financial life is performed for others, when you're signaling, displaying, maintaining a lifestyle that serves a social function, you are subjecting every financial decision to an audience that has no stake in your long-term outcomes and every interest in the short-term display. The person who builds wealth quietly has removed their financial life from this performance dynamic. Their spending decisions aren't evaluated against what signals the right things to observers. Their saving decisions don't require justification. Their investment choices don't need to be comprehensible to anyone. And this freedom, this removal of the audience, produces dramatically better financial decisions because the only metric is, does this actually build wealth? Not, does this look like I'm doing well? The invisibility isn't a sacrifice. It's a structural advantage. So, the 10 ways. Delivered not as a list to check off, but as a coherent picture of what a quietly wealthy life actually looks like in practice. The first way, you drive a car that disappears. Not a bad car, not a car you're ashamed of. A reliable, practical car that nobody would remember seeing you get out of. The average new car payment in the U.S. is around $730 a month. Someone driving a $14,000 used car with no payment and redirecting that $730 into investments at 8% over 15 years has, in round numbers, accumulated roughly $244,000 from that single invisible decision. No one saw the decision, no one saw the accumulation, but in 15 years, the account is there. The car is not the prize. The account is the prize. The second way, you automate everything that can be automated and never discuss it. Your investment contributions run on a schedule. Your savings transfer on payday. Your bills are paid automatically. You're not manually managing your money in a way that requires ongoing attention, effort, or conversation. Automated financial behavior is invisible by definition. It happens before you see the money, before you make a decision, before there's anything to observe. And as we've discussed throughout this series, automation is not just convenient. It's the specific mechanism that converts intention into consistent behavior by removing the human decision from the equation entirely. The third way, your fixed costs are invisibly low, not dramatically low in a way anyone would notice, just structurally, quietly below 50% of your take-home pay, always. You didn't move into the apartment that would have impressed your friends. You moved into the apartment that gave you $400 a month more to work with. Nobody comes to your apartment and thinks, this person is wealthy. But nobody notices the $400 a month either. Over 10 years, that $400 a month invested at 8% is $73,000. From one quiet choice about where to live that nobody at your workplace ever thought about. The fourth way, you decline things in a way that produces no social friction. Not, I'm saving money this month. Not, I'm trying to be more financially responsible. Just, I can't make it this time. Let's do something else soon. The reason you don't explain is not that you're embarrassed. It's that explanations invite negotiation. They invite the, come on, you can afford it once pressure that erodes the financial behavior you've built. The quiet no, warm, brief, without detailed justification, is the social skill that protects the financial system. Nobody needs to know why. You know why, that's enough. The fifth way, you have a high-yield savings account that holds your financial floor, somewhere around $20,000 to $25,000. And nobody knows it's there. Not because you're hiding it from people you trust in important relationships, because it's simply not a thing you talk about in normal social contexts. The financial floor changes everything about how you navigate the world, the stress reduction, the decision quality, the professional confidence. But it does all of this invisibly. The person sitting next to you at work has no idea. The friends you went to dinner with have no idea. The account just sits there quietly doing the most important single job in your financial life, absorbing chaos before it reaches your wealth-building system. The sixth way, Your investment account balance is not a thing you discuss with almost anyone, not because you're secretive by nature, but because money conversations in social contexts almost never produce useful outcomes and frequently produce damaging ones. They invite comparison, they invite unsolicited advice, they invite the social pressure to justify your approach against someone else's. Your investment balance is private information about your future self. It belongs in your financial life, not your social life. And keeping it there means it never has to defend itself against an audience that doesn't understand the timeline you're playing. The seventh way, you read and learn about money in private, consistently, in small amounts, not in a way that becomes a personality trait, not in a way that turns you into the person who always wants to talk about personal finance at social events. Just a quiet, ongoing accumulation of financial literacy that improves your decisions over time without announcing itself. The investor who has spent 5 years reading broadly about markets, behavioral economics, tax strategy, and financial planning doesn't look any different on the outside than someone who hasn't. But the quality of their financial decisions, compounded over years, produces a completely different outcome. Knowledge doesn't show up in a wardrobe. It shows up in an account balance 20 years later. The eighth way, when you get a raise, nothing changes visibly. The car stays the same. The apartment stays the same. The dinner rotation stays roughly the same. The only thing that changes is the automated investment transfer, which increases to capture the new income before your lifestyle has the chance to claim it. This is the raise to investment pipeline I've described in other videos in this series, and it's one of the most powerful invisible wealth building behaviors available. Nobody at work knows your contribution rate went up. Nobody in your social circle notices. The raise simply disappears into the compounding system, adding to a base that will quietly double and double again and double once more over the next 15 years. The ninth way, you own your employer match completely and silently. Every paycheck, your 401k contribution, and your employer's matching contribution go to work in an account that has no social visibility whatsoever. There's no status signal attached to maximizing your 401k match. Nobody sees it, nobody compliments you on it. But as we showed in an earlier video in this series, the employer match at 100% up to 3% of salary means you're receiving a 100% immediate return on every matched dollar. That $175 a month in matched contributions, compounded over 30 years at 8%, is approximately $236,000 of someone else's money working in your account. Invisible, automatic, enormous. The 10th way, you play a longer game than the people around you and never mention it. When someone talks about timing the market, you don't argue. When someone explains why now is a bad time to invest, you listen politely and keep your automated transfers running. When someone gets excited about a specific stock or a particular investment thesis, you don't have to engage or convert or win the debate. Your investment strategy doesn't need external validation because you've seen the math and you understand the arc. The quiet confidence of knowing what you're building and knowing you don't need anyone else to understand it to make it work is itself a form of financial strength. Now let me show you what these 10 invisible behaviors produce together in real numbers, because the math is the point. You're 35 years old, earning $68,000 with take-home pay around $51,000. Here's what the invisible system produces. Fixed costs held at 48%, $2,040 a month, leaving $2,610 for everything else. Automated investment transfer at 15%, $637 a month. 401k contribution, capturing full employer match. Add another $175 a month from the employer. Total invested, $812 a month. At 8% average annual return over 30 years, $812 a month becomes approximately $1.09 million. Your personal out-of-pocket contributions across those 30 years, roughly $293,000. The rest, or $797,000, Denise, was compounding on a foundation maintained by 10 behaviors nobody ever noticed. And alongside that, the $20,000 to $25,000 liquid savings floor means that no emergency, no market dip, no career disruption can interrupt the system. The compounding runs clean. The $1.09 million isn't a best-case scenario. It's the output of structural consistency, protected by an emergency buffer, running for 30 years without meaningful interruption. I know you may be frustrated at the timeline. 30 years feels like forever when you're in the middle of year 3. But the 843 rule tells you something important about that timeline. The last 10 years produce more wealth than the first 20. The patience you're exercising right now is not just virtuous. It's the setup for the phase of compounding that will feel almost surreal when it arrives. Here's the career dimension, because the invisibility of your wealth building doesn't mean it's not changing your professional life. It's changing it constantly, just below the surface. Every month that your automated system runs, you're adding to a financial position that changes your relationship with your employer. Every dollar in that account is a dollar of walkaway power, the ability to evaluate your professional situation based on what you actually want rather than what your bank account demands. The person with $200,000 invested at 45 negotiates differently than the person with $20,000. Not because anyone knows the number, because the person with $200,000 knows the number, and that knowledge changes how they carry themselves. The confidence that comes from real financial optionality is invisible from the outside, but structurally present in every professional interaction. And here's the warning, because there's one specific way the invisible wealth building system gets broken, and it's the most common failure mode I've seen across every financial audience I've talked to. The system breaks when it becomes visible, not when it gets shared exactly, but when it becomes subject to external validation. You get to $80,000 in your investment account and you tell a few people. They react with a combination of impressed and slightly competitive. Suddenly, the account is a social object, not just a financial one. The next upgrade becomes about where you should be, given your balance. The next car decision gets evaluated against what someone with $80,000 invested can afford. The next lifestyle choice gets filtered through an external lens that has no interest in your compounding arc. Keeping the wealth invisible isn't about being secretive in your close relationships. It's about keeping your financial life inside a frame where the only metric is, does this actually build wealth? The moment you let external perception into that frame, the frame bends. And once it bends, the 10 invisible behaviors start producing social friction rather than financial results. The fourth way, the quiet no, starts feeling harder. The eighth way, the invisible raise, starts feeling like denial rather than strategy. The invisibility is what makes the system safe from the comparison and status pressure that breaks financial systems built around performance. Here's where I close. The wealthy people nobody sees coming aren't mysterious. They're not hiding anything dramatic. They're driving normal cars and living in normal apartments and quietly, month after month, running a system so simple and so invisible that the people around them never notice anything worth talking about. And in 15 years, or 20, or 30, the account is there. The options are there. The freedom is there. Not because they were exceptional, because they ran a quiet system and protected it from an audience that would have bent it toward performance. You don't need anyone to see what you're building. You just need to build it. Start the invisible system today. Let it run. And let time do what time does when you don't get in its way.